I thought you were about to say something.
I was,
oh
but
my
then
God, I stunned you. This is what happens when men meet Ulla for the first time.
I
They
know.
Absolutely
Oh my
get
goodness.
stunned. Yeah. Now what?
I'm Charlie Sohn, a screenwriter and journalist,
I'm Agnes Reese, a pop singer and songwriter.
and this is Mysteries of the Euroverse.
Today, we're talking about Eurovision comebacks.
First, we deep dive into the history of UK artists who have used Eurovision to reignite their careers.
Then, we sit down with iconic Eurovision act Scooch, who represented the UK in 2007 with the classic Flying the Flag.
Finally, Tony winner Cady Huffman helps us explore some of the wildest launches and setbacks in Eurovision history in a game we're calling Remember When Ulla Danced? Will Ulla Ever Dance Again?
Take a look behind the scenes at all the scandal songs and queens. So come along as we traverse all the mysteries of the Euroverse. All the mysteries of the Euroverse.
We are back with another episode of Mysteries of the Euroverse.
This episode is all about Eurovision comebacks.
Artists who come to Eurovision years after what had been their peak to reignite their careers. In particular, we're going to be focusing in on the UK today. The UK has a very particular relationship to Eurovision. The UK, and you've talked about this, has access to the Anglophone music world pretty easily. If you are a big artist in the UK, you don't need Eurovision necessarily if you're already topping the UK singles chart.
Right.
So it's less of a crowded space. An artist who maybe topped the singles chart 10 years ago can come and represent the country.
The UK has had a complicated relationship with Eurovision. There's been times when it's been seen as kind of like a silly thing, and a way to signal that you are taking this seriously is to bring on a serious person.
The interesting thing about those points is they work in tandem, right? Because the UK doesn't have like a bevy of stars who are pounding down the door to do Eurovision, it's both beneficial to the UK to have these sort of established serious artists change the perception that the UK doesn't care about Eurovision. And also it's beneficial to the artists.
From the moment you're selected to represent your country at Eurovision, you are a part of your country's national conversation.
There are some challenges. First, an artist who has had a long career, particularly a career where they have been famous, they come with a pre-existing identity, right? And that identity is not only who they are as an artist, it's about the taste of the time that they came up in. A lot of these artists, they sound like the UK charts at the time they became famous.
If you've been a little bit away from the public eye for a moment and you're trying to do a comeback, it becomes a question of, do you lean heavily into the brand that you had, but also how well does it work today? And further from that, how does it pair with Eurovision?
Right.
Because Eurovision has a brand. You have to please the people that loved you.
Yeah.
And you have to please the people you want to fall in love with you.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
It's like polyamory.
Yeah. Towards the end of this deep dive, we're going to get to a very particular point in British Eurovision history from 2010 to 2013, when this became an explicit strategy for the UK. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that those groups faced at a time where everyone in the UK hates Eurovision and everyone at Eurovision hates the UK. Before we do that, though, we're going to go back and look at some of the antecedents to this strategy.
The most natural place to start is to throw it back to Cliff Richard.
Cliff Richard was a huge British star of the early rock and roll era. He actually was the third top-selling artist on the UK singles chart, behind only the Beatles and Elvis Presley.
Cliff Richard's career kind of starts to decline in the mid-60s.
So On My Word was the first Cliff Richard single after 23 consecutive singles to hit the UK top 10 that did not crack the top 10.
Right.
But I think the real blow was the British invasion happens. So this is like the Beatles, all these other big British acts make it to the US and they become huge. Cliff Richard is just outside of that. Like he has fallen out of
He fell off the cliff.
He fell off the cliff.
And this becomes important because around that time, he converts to evangelical Christianity. Soon after, Cliff Richard reemerged and then recording some overtly Christian material.
It put Cliff Richard in a place where he was already going through a reinvention when he decided to do Eurovision, right?
Right.
So Cliff Richard competes in Eurovision in 1968 with the song Congratulations.
Congratulations and jubilation. I will say, if you grew up in Europe around the time I did,
Which was 1968.
Congratulations and celebrations when I tell everyone that you're in love with me.
But he is one of the few people in history to manage the Eurovision comeback really well. He really did launch himself in a much more sort of family-friendly way, and that, despite several reinventions since, set him off on a much more sustained career path.
in 1980, Carrie broke into the US Top 40, followed by Dreamin', which reached number 10. Suddenly, with Olivia Newton-John from the film Xanadu, charted, as did A Little in Love, number 17, and Daddy's Home, number 23 in 1981.
In a way, we bring up Cliff Richard as kind of the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah.
Because the challenges that our acts from 2010 to 2013 faced are not challenges that Cliff Richard had to face. We were in the era of the first language rule. Eastern Europe was not a part of Eurovision at the time. So basically what you had was the UK winning a fair amount. And that meant the UK loved the contest. And so what that meant is coming out of Eurovision, Cliff Richard felt totally comfortable being the sort of UK face of Eurovision, right?
Right.
He hosted A Song for Europe, which was their national competition, 3 years in a row.
He said, congratulations, I'm hosting again.
Oh my God, yeah.
But before we get to that 2010 to 2013 era, we're going to move to Katrina and the Waves.
My God, I love all of them. Every single wave.
Every single wave. They share some similarities with Cliff Richard in regards to the time. This is 1997. Their song is Love Shine a Light. We are in the second iteration of the language rule.
Yes.
We're still kind of figuring out how to add Eastern Europe in.
The other thing to sort of note is the political situation in the UK vis-a-vis the rest of Europe, right? So 97 is when Tony Blair's Labour Party takes over. This is a very sort of liberal internationalist government. This is before they get tangled up in the Iraq War, which obviously creates a huge wedge between the UK and the rest of Europe. And again, in that way, Eurovision is a stand-in for Europe, as it is in so many situations that we talk about.
Right.
So the reputation of Eurovision in the UK was both good because the UK was still winning, but also because Europe meant positive things to the people in the UK, and people in the rest of Europe did not necessarily have the criticisms of the UK that they would have later.
Right. So bridging the ocean between the UK and Europe
Were the
Katrina and the
Waves.
Waves. You got where I was going. Katrina and the Waves was run by the drummer of the band, Alex Cooper, but was fronted by the lead singer, Katrina Lescanich, but with Kimberly Rue as the main songwriter. So think of it a little bit as like the different branches of government.
And it was a divided government. Let me tell you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Kimberly Rue actually used to be the front man, but they didn't actually achieve success until Katrina Lescanich got behind the mic. And that's how we got the song Walking on Sunshine.
Right.
I'm walking on sunshine. I'm walking on sunshine.
In their following album, it's not just Mr. Rue who's writing all the songs. There's a bunch of them.
Right. And in fact, Katrina Lescanich writes a lot of the songs on this
How
album.
dare she be in the spotlight and write songs?
I know. Well, it's actually...
And be a woman?
But it is kind of interesting, right? This band used to be fronted by Kimberly Rue, finds success when Katrina Lescanich starts fronting it. Then Katrina Lescanich takes over the songwriting, essentially, with this other member of the band. And the only minor hit from that album is one of the two songs that Kimberly Rue wrote for it.
Clearly they needed Katrina, but Katrina also needed Rue. Despite tensions, they did stay together
Yes.
for 12 years after their first hit, which is when they went to Eurovision.
Right.
With Love Shine a Light. Love Shine a Light.
Yes.
Love shine a light in every corner of my dream. Let the love light carry. Let the love light carry.
Love Shine a Light was a Kimberly Rue written song. Katrina Liskanich basically was like, we wrote this song, we never put it on an album because it's so cheesy and Eurovision-y, so maybe this is good for Eurovision. This is a direct quote from Kimberly Rue. The system in those days was that anybody could send a cassette with their song to Terry Wogan. He would play the best cassettes on his radio show, which had about 8 million listeners. 8 million people actually heard a cassette demo of Love Shine a Light by Katrina and myself.
It is interesting, though, because it also speaks to that, and this is a story we've seen in many national finals, how one person can really shape the national contest.
Oh, yeah.
And here it's very clear, like Terry Wogan is literally picking these people.
Yes.
Which I also think is important to something we've talked about before, that if Terry Wogan is the identity of the selection for Eurovision, what happens when he gives up on Eurovision?
Katrina and the Waves went to the Great British Song Contest with Love Shine a Light. They won the contest. They ended up representing the UK at Eurovision, and they won the entire contest.
But this is also where we get to their challenge.
Yes.
Because it's clear that the band didn't quite feel that this song really fit their brand.
Right.
And despite winning Eurovision, they felt that still afterwards.
Right.
How do you follow that up when the song that became so successful for you is not the bullseye of what you really want to continue doing?
Katrina and the Waves post-Eurovision really was stuck between these two identities that they never really were able to reconcile.
Between Katrina
and the Waves. I mean, actually quite literally in a way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There were elements of the group that did not want to lean into that direction. The band broke up and there was a legal fight over the name. And unfortunately, Katrina could no longer use the name Katrina and the Waves. And there were, for a while, two sort of separate splinter groups. Then even on top of that, the fact that, as you said, they didn't love Shine a Light, it sort of then reflected on the Eurovision community that they were like, oh, you came here with this song that you thought was kind of mediocre, and we gave you victory. And then nothing really came of it. It's notable to me, given that, you know, Walking on Sunshine is as big as it is. Like, you never hear about Katrina and the Waves in the context of Eurovision from Eurovision fans.
Walking on Sunshine is the song that is successful to a degree that is just like so beyond imaginable. But also, without Love Shine a Light, a lot of people would have considered them a one-hit wonder.
No, 100%. So that's kind of the backdrop for this like period that we're going to end our deep dive on, which again is from 2011 to 2013. What's in the background that these artists had to deal with that Katrina and the Waves and Cliff Richard didn't? We are now out of the era of the language rule.
You know, for context, the language rule mandated that a country had to submit songs in one of their official languages. It did mean that only two countries had the most accessible world language as an option.
English, right?
Right.
So you had the UK and Ireland winning a lot during these periods when this language rule was in place. Not only do you have the repeal of the language rule, you also have Eastern Europe being very, very competitive at Eurovision. And so therefore the UK starts to do less well.
It's very easy to consider something you're not familiar with weird, novelty, and kind of dismiss it because you don't recognize
And
it.
particularly when that act is consistently beating the acts that you're sending, right?
And you're like, we are the culture.
Exactly. Yes. My God, she used the Queen's English on that one.
That was a clip of Terry Wogan.
That actually
That
was
was
the
Terry
corpse
Wogan.
of Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, no.
And then broadly, there is the UK's relationship to Europe, right? And I think you can trace it back to the Iraq War. Tony Blair really got fucked by the transition between Bill Clinton and George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Right? Bill Clinton had the exact same politics as Tony Blair. Clinton was kind of like our answer to Reagan. Blair was Labour's answer to Thatcher. And part of that was that, like, internationalism is great when you can trust your partners, right?
Right.
And George W. Bush came in, and I think that whereas the rest of Europe was like, well, like, clearly fuck this guy. Like, Blair felt like he was in this position of like, he had just solidified this tighter relationship with the US.
Right.
Like, and, you know, he put all his chips on that and then lost Eurovision.
And though the time period that we're about to talk about is pre-Brexit, it's in the rumbling era.
Oh,
of
yeah,
Brexit.
it's on the road. The UK is not doing great at Eurovision. And then in 2010, looking forward to the 2011 contest, the BBC does away with a national public competition. They turn to the boy band Blue.
As someone who grew up in Norway, I was very aware of Blue, and their collaboration with Elton John was like everywhere.
Always seems to me the sorry seems to be the hardest word.
So even though Americans might not be super familiar with Blue, they will be familiar with Simon Cowell.
Who?
Yeah. Who originally put together two of the members in a group, but then Blue got bluer and grew to more
Yes.
Blue. They had a huge hit with the album All Rise, but then they went to the US.
So Blue was shooting a music video in New York, and they were in town during 9/11. Unfortunately, one of the members said, "This New York thing is being blown out of proportion. What about whales? They're ignoring animals that are more important. Animals need saving, and that's more important."
That's
Which I
just
liked.
insane.
It's kind of crazy, and I like that he repeated it.
but also, like, what about whales?
What about?
like what?
I mean,
like,
yeah, it had been years since Free Willy.
quite a few people died
Yeah.
in 9/11.
And I will say, given what we just talked about with the UK and the Iraq War, 9/11 was going to be significant in making it much harder for him to do well at Eurovision. years later.
yeah. Their next album with songs like Guilty peaked at number 2, but then they break up. They tried to do solo projects, as so many do.
Yeah.
Not hugely successful.
So Blue is in the studio working on a comeback around the time that the BBC is like, all right, we got to change strategies. So they go to Blue. And I think the first indication that we have that this is not going to be a super successful comeback for Blue is what Simon Webb said about what happened when they were approached. He says, "As we were an established band before and the perception of Eurovision is not taken that seriously, we did think about it."
Can you do it again in his accent?
Absolutely.
They had full control over the song choice, and they chose a song that sounded very much like them pre-breakup.
I will say, as far as like respect for the Eurovision community, they were performing at national finals all over the places. Like they were getting themselves out there to the Eurovision audience, which I think did engender a fair amount of goodwill.
Yeah, and they received a respectable 11th place.
Yes.
And according to the rules of Mysteries of the Euroverse, that is a top.
Yes. The fact that, shortly after they were dropped from their label is an indication that, like, even though they did well at Eurovision, they still had trouble converting that to a post-Eurovision success. And I would attribute it to, if you listen to I Can, there is, again, like, nothing about that song that feels like, oh, what we're seeing is fresh and new, and these people who we loved in this one era bringing something new to the table.
Right. But I think the improvement in the results kind of made BBC go, aha, we're onto something.
Yes.
Another internal selection, they select Engelbert Humperdinck.
I had the last waltz with you.
And if you think that sounds like an old man, you're correct.
So I love this little factoid. He was going to be the oldest contestant at Eurovision, but that year, I'm pretty sure,
Babushkas?
the Babushkas out-aged him.
That is
that is
amazing.
the only reason
Also,
he was never the oldest contestant.
This was the first Eurovision that I watched outside of Norway. And where did I watch it? In London.
Oh
and-
my God.
So the people I'm watching with are like 18-year-olds. They were like, what the fuck? Here you see a bunch of younger artists performing and they're like, this is what we
This guy comes out.
chose?
I hate to have this opinion because I love an older performer at Eurovision, but it's kind of like when you're talking about Joe Biden. It's like the literal number of the age is not the problem.
No, I mean, if the US entered Eurovision next year and sent Cher, I would be like, go off.
Yeah,
Love
exactly. Engelbert Humperdinck was...
It doesn't trip off the tongue, does it?
Well, okay, so here's the other crazy thing. He chose this name.
But also,
He had a normal name, but his manager, Gordon Mills, thought that our good friend Engelbert should be named after a 19th century German opera composer. Engelbert Humperdinck was a contemporary of Cliff Richard, who performed at Eurovision in 1968. He will say he's not a crooner, and this is his justification. No crooner has the range that I have.
But it's interesting because a lot of crooners, their songs are not in a very vast range.
It is the Sinatra
soulful,
masculinity.
Yeah.
It's like you actually don't want it to be too sung because that's like kind of feminizing. You know?
Yeah. It's like big dick energy singing.
Yeah, big dink energy singing.
yeah.
Big Humperdinck.
Big Humperdinck singing.
There were elements of this strategy I could see being really appealing. They brought in these pop songwriters who had like a lot going on. So there was Sasha Skarbek, who had written for Jason Mraz and Adele. Martin Terefe, he wrote that Train song, Hey Soul Sister, very much adult contemporary. But, you know, there's something I could see being appealing about taking this artist who
Tell me more.
had a long career, was very famous, and pairing him with a song by these songwriters who, looking at their credits, these are people who were not going to deliver something that's just entirely throwback. There's a story I found about the group Gorillaz. Feeling bad. Very contemporary.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm feeling glad I got sunshine.
So they were recording an album and they wanted an Engelbert Humperdinck feature on it. Now, this never got to Engelbert Humperdinck. Once he found out, he was like, this was the biggest mistake of my career. So clearly is with it a little bit and like is interested in trying new things. Why this might have looked good on paper is you would be expecting a song with a contemporary flavor from these people.
You would expect a little less Engelbert and a little bit more Humperdinck.
The song was called Love Will Set You Free.
If you love someone, follow your heart, 'cause love comes once if you're lucky enough.
Which, you know,
It didn't set him free unless that is 25th place out of 26.
right. I really can't fault the UK for their next choice in 2013 because they sent Bonnie Tyler.
Oh, love Bonnie.
Desmond Child was literally already inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame by the time he wrote this Eurovision song, but it was not a Eurovision song at all. She was in Nashville. She recorded an album. You can see hints of why Bonnie Tyler struggled at Eurovision in this quote when they asked her about participating. She said, "What am I going to say? No. I had a new album coming out, and I knew they'd never play my album at all if I refused." That is not a person who is like, I have topped the charts and my next big dream is to be at Eurovision. She placed 19th, which again is not awful, but not
25th.
great.
It's this weird thing where they're like, we're going to take these huge international successes that all they maybe could argue had successes that were bigger than Eurovision.
Yeah.
And this idea that it's like, we are gracing Eurovision with their presence.
This idea of relationship to the Eurovision community is so key. And actually, this is why we skipped a little group in 2007. So our Eurovision interview on this episode is the group Scooch, who represented the UK in 2007. Now, again, this was a bit of a comeback for them. They got back together with this song, Flying the Flag, which was very much designed for Eurovision and just became part of the Eurovision culture.
Absolutely. And iconic to this day.
Our other guest is Cady Huffman, Tony Award-winning Broadway actress for her role as Ulla in The Producers. Before we get to Cady, though, let's fly that flag over to Scooch. We are here with Scooch, who represented the UK with the iconic Eurovision classic, Flying the Flag, parentheses, for you. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is really exciting.
Thank you.
Can you talk about what your relationship was to Eurovision growing up?
Me and Natalie did a TV program a few years ago now called When Eurovision Goes Horribly Wrong.
Oh, yeah. And there was an act who were, I think they'd just gone before us, but I never realised until that day that we filmed that TV show, my first 7-inch single, so vinyl records, that I was ever given was actually from Belle and the Devotions, who recorded Love Games in 1984. So it was weird that when they were there, I remember thinking, oh my God, I know who Belle and the Devotions are, but I never associated them with Eurovision. But it was 3 girls in these boxy kind of Alexis Colby Carrington jackets and PVC skirts with punk rocker hair doing this Motown kind of Diana Ross and the Supreme song. It was absolutely incredible. What about you, Caroline? Anything?
My first memory of Eurovision was actually through a song. I didn't know about Eurovision, but my dad had an album with Sandy Shaw, Puppet on a String. And I think as a child, that was a really kind of like fun melodic song. And then through that, I learned about what Eurovision was, and then obviously became a huge, massive fan of the nuts craziness that goes on.
That early 90s, Michael Ball and Sonia both came second, I think, didn't they? They did, yeah. We were just about to win again, then it all changed.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and actually, can you talk about that a bit? Because, you know, the UK has a complicated history with Eurovision. In the 90s, it really dominated the contest. And then people point to Terry Wogan as sort of the driver of this in a certain way. That the perception of what Eurovision was changed, and the UK became kind of disenchanted with the contest.
Sir Terry, rest in peace, he had his own style of presenting, and he sort of said it how it was, didn't he? So if he didn't like something or he thought that something was a bit silly, he would say it. But he always took it seriously, as in it wasn't like he was there to mock. I think he would have a few Baileys on the night, and it is just to say, it was entertainment, especially when Sweden hosted it again a few years back. They really had that sort of tongue-in-cheek fun with it, that whole sequence about how to write a Eurovision song.
Right,
I mean, that was all very how Terry would have thought about it. We're all just having a good time.
I did not expect to ever see a grinder joke on Eurovision.
Wasn't that brilliant though?
And I love that, like, knowing their audience, the fact that the sound alone can be the punchline. They're like, our audience will get it.
Suddenly everybody at home reaches for their phone and checks that it's on silent. It was funny because with Ollie Alexander, my husband Gareth had said, I'm so glad that I'm not watching this with my mother. And I thought, like, when did you get old?
Do you remember being asked quite a few times whether we were taking it seriously? But we were like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
As a performer, why would you not want the opportunity, one, to represent your country, and two, to get to perform on the biggest stage that you will ever get to perform on? Flip it to the likes of Justin Timberlake and Madonna, who have both used it as a massive platform to showcase their work. If you go back to maybe the original conception, it was a song competition where they'd have a live band, so it was very much about the music. Whereas I think probably through our generational change in the way we landed in Eurovision, it's a television programme that gets the biggest ratings every single year. You know, the people who are entering are from this time, aren't they?
Right.
That's the key thing. It's their way of expressing how they are right now in a world where, for example, you don't need live human beings to create music anymore, let alone musicians. Everything can be done digitally. And it's more, I think, about great visuals.
So to scooch us back to the beginning, like, what was the audition process like?
1998, me and Caroline were at college together. Lee Latchford Evans, who is in Steps, he was the year above us at college, wasn't he? And he went to an audition for a line dancing pop group at the time. Obviously, Steps became Steps, and they're iconic. And so the same management a year later wanted to put another group together. Me and Caroline went. And then what happened with you, Natalie?
We're telling the truth here, aren't we? Yeah. we had a story back in the day, but we can be honest now. So, yeah, no. So what happened was I went to the original auditions. I got down to the last 10 and then I was booted out. So they went in to like record and I don't know, like basically the other singer got, and then I re-auditioned and then got in the second time round. And there was another David before. He left the band and we got David. Yay!
Then me and David moved in together. The management had a flat for us, and Caroline lived up the road, didn't you, as well? EMI picked us up, And then we were doing schools tours, schools tours in gay clubs. That was what we were doing. Under 18s. Yeah. So we were in the back of a tour bus for months and months. We supported Bewitched, and then we met Daphne and Celeste. Westlife had just started, and Five, and it was quite a boy band heavy sort of time.
The songwriters on a lot of your initial hits, right, were Mike Stock and Matt Aiken, who are kind of pop legends. Never Gonna Give You Up. So what was it like working with them?
The process was they would create this song. Natalie would always go in for a full day, wouldn't you, and record your vocal, and then we would fit our vocals in around it. That's when we identified the Scooch sound, which I think went from Natalie opening up to Caroline doing her harmony over the top and then building on that. But for me, the actual experience, I probably shouldn't say this, that was probably the least favourite part, because as a male in Scooch, we're kind of redundant. So there just seemed to be a lot of hanging around to do an ooh and R or something that you never felt as if you contributed. And Mike was a perfectionist. He knew exactly what he wanted out of you. And if that meant, in my case, having to re-record your vocals 20 times...
Oof.
Syllable by syllable sometimes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, very, very kind of musical, of where we've all kind of done musical theatre training. And it was very alien, actually, doing it like that.
I grew up with Kylie Minogue records posted on my wall. So working with the person who wrote the songs that I knew, trying to find that window to ask him questions. And I did ask him, I did say, Mike, who's the greatest person that you ever worked with? Hoping that he would say Kylie Minogue or Sonia.
Right.
And he said Donna Summer. But he added to the end, because she only did one take. So again, that's another reason why I thought, is that a dig at me? Because
I was going to say, felt like a jab.
That was their job, and they were really good at doing their job. So why would a 22-year-old person ever have an opinion that mattered to somebody like that who had that success? Now, aged 47, I've got 47 years worth of things to share, whether it be an idea, a lyric, something that I want to do. They talk about pop acts being puppets. We kind of were, because we probably got into it chasing the dream of thinking that we just wanted to be on top of the pops.
You had so much success early on. What was that like emotionally at a young age?
We worked 365 days a year. We'd do maybe a schools tour in Scotland, 3 schools in the morning, and then we would drive all the way through the day to get to London to go to a party. And then we'd get back in the car and drive all the way back up to carry on. It was just non-stop. When we did Eurovision, we were all a little bit older in 2007 compared to 1998. And we were able to actually sit back and take it all in and actually observe what we were doing and enjoy each other more. Whereas when we were young, it was literally just like, we were puppets in a sense that we had our schedule and we got told what to eat, we got told where to go, what to wear, how to do our hair, all that stuff. I found one of our schedules the other day. Our manager, Steve, used to call it a Scooch duel. Funny guy, yeah. Maybe it was for like a 2-month period, and it was literally dates every single day. We were doing something or other. For me, the schools tours were a bit of a low point, I'll be honest. We get to like a school wherever in the country, and our performance would be in like the assembly hall, and they'd have maybe like a store cupboard with like sports equipment in it. We would hide in there whilst the kids would come in. They didn't know who we were either, these kids. We weren't on telly at that point. And we'd have this like slightly naff poster that we'd put on the back wall saying Scooch. It definitely puts hairs on your chest. Our favourite audience, obviously ever, is our gay audience.
Right.
But another slightly low point was the under-18s nightclubs. Ooh, I mean, they were all too cool for school.
We were on this little like stage that was really, really small, surrounded by like under-18s, and one of them literally grabbed my backside. I was like in shock, and I decided that I was going to kind of like get them back, and I just grabbed their backside and I literally shook it, and I went, yeah, under 18, so I shouldn't have said that, should I?
Different time.
It was like singing for 10% and 90% promotion.
We literally never sang live until Eurovision.
Wait, really?
We just didn't. It wasn't done. No one did. Britney,
Right,
obviously, Bewitched, they never sang live. We did one gig where it was literally us on stage and just one man getting drunk in the audience. They put our CD in. And you remember it went super fast. And it was our first single, When My Baby, which was like fast.
Yeah.
And we were absolutely just peeing our pants. It was like, what can you do? No one's here watching anyway. So let's just kind of laugh. And we performed at a movie premiere. And Al Pacino was watching us, which was just bizarre. We were probably the last thing Al Pacino wanted to see. And we were at the beginning of the song and the music just stopped. And none of our mics were live.
It was always like you'd have the CD player at the
Right.
So we'd be jumping around and it would just
and it
go
would skip.
skipping all the time. And obviously we had like coat hangers for mics. So even when it stopped, we couldn't even say anything to cover it.
It's nice to sing live, but it's also something that we're not very well practiced at doing as a group. But I suppose for me and Russ, it's not as if we've got an awful lot to do with them. There's more pressure probably on the girls, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean,
I think by the time we got to our third single, me and you were like, well, you know, it'd be nice to have a little bit of something, you know, maybe we could do an ad-lib or something. For The Best Is Yet to Come, we did do a couple of ad-libs, didn't we? They never made it on the record, but
This is interesting because it sounds like your recording process, you mostly recorded separately. And then, you know, not performing live. It's like, as you say, like as a band, like finding your sound, balance, all that. It's kind of on the technicians.
I saw somewhere that More Than I Needed to Know was called by one journalist the best Eurovision winning song that never was. So did you ever consider in those early years entering Eurovision?
yeah, I mean, thinking about it, it would have been perfect at the time. I can't remember us ever actually talking about it. Can you?
And I think in my head, I probably thought Eurovision was for old people. I didn't view it as being a cool thing that I wanted to be involved in.
So then, can you talk about the group disbanding after For Sure?
I think it was just a sort of natural kind of departure. There were no more singles to record or albums to record. I was expecting my first baby. So we all kind of went off and did our separate things. But I was really, really, really surprised when Russ sort of came to us all to say, would you be interested in doing Eurovision? And I remember thinking, well, yeah, but obviously that's not going to happen, is it?
I'd been to the selection show the year before and I thought we should have a go at this. So I contacted the BBC the next year and said, what do you think about Scooch doing it? And they were actually really excited. Oh, you know, because we hadn't been away for that long. There'd actually been, I think, a few rumours, definitely, I'd heard.
And you started those?
No, probably on some forum somewhere, yeah. So I got together with a guy called Morton who used to work with us back in the day when we wrote a song. The BBC said, we love it, but it's too good. Not too good, but it's, you know, it was just a really nice just pop song. There was nothing crazy about it. It was just a nice song. Have you got anything else? Anything that's a bit more, you know, fun? So that's when Flying the Flag was born. So we did a demo for that, just sort of a 30-second demo. They loved it. Then that's when it all started.
So we got that initial phone call saying we might be going into the selection process. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to ignore that. It's not going to happen. And then we actually heard a bit of the song and I was like, oh gosh, this actually might happen. And then we got into the actual Making Your Mind Up, which was our selection show. And when we heard the other acts that we were going to be up against, again, I thought there's no chance because they all had record deals. We were the only ones that didn't have any kind of backing behind us. But I think it was our complete kind of visual performance that did it. But obviously as well, we had the amazing moment with Terry Wogan, who announced the wrong winner. The two presenters were Sir Terry Wogan, who's a legend, and Fern Cotton. It was ourselves and a singer called Cindy, who was actually French. They decided, I don't know why, to announce the winner together. And obviously we heard what Terry was saying.
Yeah.
We started immediately clapping, you know, well done, Cindy. Let's go to work tomorrow. Let's go back to our normal lives. And then Fern went, no, it's Scooch. And then it was just that moment. If they'd not cocked that up, it wouldn't have been as shocking. Suddenly, oh yeah, we've won. What is going on?
And then you had to perform,
We
right?
had to perform that song 3 times on that show. Oh my God, what were we doing? Why did we do that? It was mad. We were on the front page of various tabloid newspapers because apparently we had secret singers off stage. They just called backing vocalists. That's who they are. That again was almost a blessing in disguise because it gave us way more press. People who weren't clued into Eurovision at all would have heard about that and gone, oh, let's watch this big kind of cock up on TV. We're here now still. Like, what is going on? People still want to hear from us. It's great. It's great.
The thing about the staging of our number, you've got to remember, if you go back to the selection show, you had a lot of solo artists. So we were the only group of people, really. So as a choreographer, you had more people and more opportunity to do something with it.
There were changes made before Eurovision, right? Can you talk about
I think
some of that?
To win the UK contest, you know, we're flying the flag. We've got Union Jacks everywhere. And that's part of, I think, the reason, you know, that we were chosen. It's like, yes, come on, we're going to fly the flag for you. But then obviously the UK can't vote for us when we're out here. So we're like, UK. Oh, actually, we can't just have Union Jacks everywhere, can we? Because that's ridiculous. So we put all the flags on and things like that.
The song reached number 5 in the UK Top 40 chart.
I think coming home with that number 5 chart hit was, what more could you want? That was a gift given to us from the people who sent us to do the competition on behalf of them. We've always had that affection, I think, with the British public. They've looked after us firmly, tongue-in-cheek over the past few years, and I think we've looked after them right back.
We talk a lot about the gap between the charts and Eurovision, and because sometimes they're very linked and sometimes they're not at all.
There's a difference there, isn't there? It's a TV show. That's the reality of it. I don't think it's about selling records. I don't think it's about chart positions. I don't think it's about anything other than ratings.
In the years following 2007, Flying the Flag has really, I think, become a Eurovision classic. Why do you think the song has had the staying power that it has?
The visual side of it, but the actual lyrics and almost the instructional side of it. We've found that in holiday parks in the UK, it's the song that is always played for the kids, and they will do the flying the flag arms. I think it's as simple as that.
And you have a children's version of the song, right?
Oh yeah, so we did. There's a program called Blue Peter, and it's literally for children. Yeah. So for my lyrics, when I say we wish you a very pleasurable journey, I just did it unsexually. So I just said, I wish you a really pleasurable journey. Whereas David had to completely edit his word. Instead of something to suck on for landing, sir, it was.
Would you like a sweet, sir?
Which it was. It was very strange. It was almost like, what? Why are we doing this program if we can't actually do like the best bits of the song? But I think it's not only the visual. All you have to say is, we did the aeroplane song. I was chatting to a guy yesterday on the plane, a lovely 80-year-old gentleman, and he said, "Oh, you did the Eurovision." And I said, "We were the airline crew," and it was like straight away. It was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Because also, it's so in your head.
So do you feel like there's a sense of that sort of a British opinion on Eurovision changing in a way?
Well, I think if Sam Ryder hadn't done it, I don't think Ollie possibly would be doing it. So I think it's maybe like a stepping stone. More people that I know, this isn't because I have done Eurovision. They're rewatching Eurovision now. Maybe they poo-pooed it when they were younger. They're rewatching it now and going, actually, this is bloody good. It's so diverse. What show can you watch where you watch one number of whatever it is, and then next you've got an ice skating Russian man ice skating round a piano? I mean, it's just bonkers, isn't it? And you can't not like that. Even if you're going to watch it and go, oh, you know, just kind of slate everything, it's still entertaining. Do you know what I mean?
Thank you all so much. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank you for spending the time.
Euroverse.
Eurovision is the most watched non-sports broadcast in the world. And because of that, it can be an incredible tool for launching artists into the stratosphere. But the bright lights of the Eurovision stage can also crack a promising artist.
So today we're going to explore the differences between a performance that effectively uses the Eurovision stage to launch a career and one that damages or even ends the trajectory of an up-and-coming artist overnight. We're going to do this with a game we're calling Remember When Ulla Danced? Will Ulla Ever Dance Again?
Now, to help us with this game, we are joined by an actress whose show-stopping moments have launched an illustrious career of stage and screen, Cady Huffman. Cady received a Tony Award nomination for her performance in The Will Rogers Follies, a Tony Award for her iconic turn as Ulla in The Producers, and an Outer Critics Circle Award nomination for her work in the incredible play, the Nance. She's appeared in television shows from The Good Wife to Blue Bloods to, of course, her scene-stealing role in Larry David's Curb Your Enthusiasm. Cady, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good day.
Incredible. Now, Cady, before we get to the game,
Yes.
what do you know about Eurovision going into this?
Everything. No.
Yeah.
We have brought an expert onto the
Yeah,
podcast.
I've seen it once. I was visiting Iceland, and it was playing like at every party. It was just on the TVs. I was like, what are we watching? I became very aware of it and just fascinated.
Yeah.
Fascinated that there is a European culture that's being presented.
Right.
Yes.
Which is like, oh, that's weird because it's so many different countries.
Right.
And then the very individual cultures of those countries.
Right, 100%.
Like there's just such a soup that Europe comes together in a very kind sort of spirit of competition that Americans don't relate to.
I think you really sort of hit the nail on the head on the culture of Eurovision. There is this sort of love fest about
It's
Oh my God, it's the Great
the word
British
I'm looking for is
Baking Show.
ingenuous, right?
Yes.
And why do we like that freaking baking show so much? Because everybody's kind to each other.
Right.
Even watching Project Runway evolve to, oh, do you need help with that? Rather than, I'm
Right.
hiding your glue gun. You know?
right.
What I love too, because there's obviously processes that go through each country to get to that song, that performance, right?
100%.
And it's up to the country to what that process is going to be.
Oh my God,
that-
we can just like pack up and go home. Like, Cady knows it.
Is each country, do they do like almost a reality show within the country?
Let me
get
turn
there?
to the European here. And
No, I mean, it's some countries do internal selection, but in a lot of countries, Iceland being one of them, their biggest TV show of the year, at least when it comes to music, is the selection process. So like in Iceland, it's Song Keppningen. Think of how to translate it.
Didn't it? It's like Donna
Yeah.
McKechnie comes over to Iceland and chooses the performance. Donna McKechnie.
oh my God. No, I just love the idea that Donna McKechnie keeps showing up and she's like, come on, like put me in. I can still be in the chorus.
I'm a dancer.
That's incredible.
And then it's funny because then the Will Ferrell movie picked Iceland as the setting of the movie.
And Will Ferrell's Swedish, right?
Well, his wife is
His
Swedish.
wife, but he speaks Swedish.
He speaks Swedish.
and his children are.
His turn as Ulla was amazing. I don't know.
Anyway, let's do this
Should we do some-
podcast.
what about Eurovision?
What are we doing here?
That is actually, I wake up every morning screaming that. What's going on? What are we doing? Okay, so we are going to play you a clip. And that clip is either a clip of a Eurovision performance that launched an up-and-coming artist into the stratosphere,
Okay.
or it was pretty near a career-ending performance for one reason or another.
Okay.
And you are going to have to determine whether that Ulla danced again.
Okay.
Moving to our first clip, which is a
Teenage
song called
Life?
Teenage Life. This represented the UK in 2006.
Okay. There's some middle-aged guy singing with a bunch of Matildas. Yeah. Or Matilda meets Britney Spears.
Oh my God.
He's trying to do sort of hip hop. How old is he? And these girls are not children. They're just that wrong age.
Yeah.
Like, are you legal or aren't you?
Not a girl, not yet a woman?
Yeah,
Is that-
sort of, how lovely to
They
be a
might
woman.
be innocent.
Really?
Incredible.
This had to kill this guy's career. It just had to kill it. Didn't it?
You are 100% correct.
Of
Katie.
course I am. In rehearsal, I'd say, now Ulla Mark. And aren't the Brits known for theater?
Yes, but
They're not
despite
known
the
for
fact,
taste.
Well, but
Not
also,
known for taste.
yes, a country full of amazing arts institutions, yet they went with a footballer.
Yes. So this guy.
Oh, is he a soccer player?
Well, he
Oh my God, we traveled from Sweden to,
Right, we're just back in Jersey.
So this is Daz Sampson. As Magnus said, he started out as a footballer, as they say across the pond.
Yeah.
But after an injury, he got into music. Before this number had several top 10 hits in the UK. After that performance.
Really?
Yeah. But Cady, after this performance,
None.
Over. Yes. The song placed 19th out of 24.
Is there only 24 countries?
Okay. Turning again to the European.
Yes, thank you.
When Eurovision started out, sorry, answer the question. I went back to 1957. So it was only like 7 countries the first year, but then it grew, and you can't put 40 countries into one night. So it wasn't until after this that they introduced the semifinals. Now it's a 3-night thing. But at this point, they would have had the relegation system, which meant that some countries didn't participate every year.
So this was it.
So for this year, there were 24 competing.
So there were some worse than that. That's hard to believe.
There's something so guys getting cast in musicals in high school about what he
this
did.
is straight guy
where it's
privilege
just,
right here. Yeah.
Where they're just like, the guy that's playing football injured himself. He can be the lead in the musical.
Right.
Yeah, right. I hear him singing in the shower.
Yeah.
And the irony is that he went back to football.
Yeah, so there is
Really?
a positive ending to this story, which is why I think I feel comfortable really going in on our friend Daz. But he tried in 2021, actually, to return to Eurovision by auditioning for Belarus's Eurovision competition. Not only did he get disqualified, the entirety of Belarus got disqualified. Now, to be clear, not his fault, but that was the year they got kicked out of Eurovision for sending a lot of fascist songs. Like
Also, Daz did not do the fascist songs.
Yeah. Daz was not
Do we
responsible.
have footage of those?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, now that we're in season 2 of this podcast, we've played the fascist songs so many times.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, because this is the thing that is
They're
like
very fun.
So we are moving back to 1974, but we are staying with the UK with Long Live Love.
All right.
See if you can figure out what the song's about.
On a wet day, dry day, great to be alive day, brother takes the stand. Cymbals ringing, everybody singing in the Sally Annie band.
Singing for the Brits in a nightgown. Oh, my mother had that nightgown.
Is that your mother?
It's my mom. Olivia Newton-John is my mother. She is very pretty, isn't she?
Yes.
God, she's so pretty. I don't know. I'm so in love with her.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it didn't kill her career
Right.
because, I mean, she became Sandy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it some sort of national anthem that I'm not understanding?
No, I just think it's not a very good song.
Oh, no, it's a terrible song. But look at her.
But her,
I'm
right?
so in love with her.
Exactly.
So I'm going to assume this helped her out.
Absolutely. She placed 4th, but she did lose to a little band.
ABBA?
Yep. Nailed it.
Well,
That was
they
the
got
same
big
year.
too.
Yeah. In the late 60s, she had been touring like small clubs, including by accident a strip club that she did not realize, until they took the stage in frilly high collar dresses. And she's like, oh, oops.
People were,
And then she had a little bit of traction in 1973, but 1974 was like her year. Eurovision obviously happened. And she had her first top 10 hit in the US and a Grammy for Best Female Country Vocalist.
So this was her like big breakout year, and Eurovision capped it off. Yeah.
Again, the Brits.
This
I
is not
have
the only
nothing
year.
against my former oppressors. But I'm just so angry I've never gotten to work there.
Yeah.
So my bitterness is absolutely...
Go in.
Well, let's see how that compares to the Netherlands.
Okay.
We are staying in 1974 with a song called I See a Star.
There's such a lot of beauty you can live for. You only need someone to open up your eyes.
Okay, it's a much beefier John.
Yep.
Okay. And they have a puppet? Oh. Oh my. It's a thing. It's a puppet spinning. And didn't that guy on the left there play for Elton John? Dee Dee somebody?
I didn't realize we
The
were
guitar player?
getting such an industry expert.
I have a feeling this killed that band.
So you are right in that Ulla did not dance again, but
No.
there's a little bit of a twist. So the band is called Mouth and McNeil. The guy is Mouth. The woman is McNeil.
So they came in third?
Yes, so they beat Olivia Newton-John.
I'm taking my 9-year-old self back to what we had HR Puff and stuff. We had Sid and Marty Croft. Children's programming was hallucinogenic.
Oh,
It really
so yeah,
was.
this does kind of feel.
There was a lot of experimentation. There were very few channels on television.
very few
So you-
channels, a lot of mushrooms.
So
you know.
yeah, oh my God, LSD, obviously. But it was like you were being fed some very singular ideas.
What's kind of amazing about this, though, is that they were a huge success coming out of Eurovision. But
They were.
but Mouth and McNeil just could not get along. He apparently was very, very domineering.
I tell you, when she looked at the camera, I'm like, do I need to help you?
And so they did eventually break up shortly after Eurovision, and they both went on to do different musical projects. Mouth started a project called Big Mouth and Little Eve.
In the previous name, he was like, clearly the power dynamic wasn't clear enough.
So now I'm Big Mouth.
So I've gone from Mouth to Big Mouth, and my partner is now Little Eve.
Yeah, there is
I
a
will
little
say,
misogyny in that.
yeah. I have seen Big Mouth occasionally on Grindr. I would avoid. Yeah,
That's just your moniker, I bet.
Yeah, well, listen. Again, when you got it, flaunt it.
That's it.
But yeah. And also, wasn't your boyfriend's original nickname Little Eve? So the next song takes us back to the UK, but not 1974.
Why
this
am I getting
time,
all the Brits? It's because I'm so bitter about it.
Yeah. We're really trying to hit a nerve here.
but this time in 2003 with the song Cry Baby.
Okay, 2003.
It's not enough. I need to trust for you to try anymore.
She's cute. Okay, terrible choreography. Oh, wow. Yeah, hair. That I'm sorry, 2003 is not quite equating. It's very 93. What is that? Is that what sex is to Brits? And then the random guy playing the guitar, but I don't think he's plugged in.
All singing has to be live.
Yeah.
But the music,
But the
obviously.
playing is
The
not.
instruments have changed over the years.
She's awfully cute. I have a feeling she's like a West End musical theater star or something.
Dance again?
I think she danced again. Oh, but it's not just the Brits. It's all
It's
of them.
remember, yeah.
Ulla never danced again.
That's incredible.
So the band was Gemini, and they earned the famous null point. It's the dreaded 0 points.
I love how excited you got.
I gotta say, for the ones who are only listening and not watching, the joy in Cady's face.
Head over to the
Well,
YouTube.
you know, you want to make us. You just want to be remembered.
Don't land
you
in the
don't want to
middle.
be in the middle. Yeah,
Exactly.
Don't land-
And Gemini admitted that their performance was a little off key, and they claimed they were unable to hear the backing track due to a technical fault.
So my favorite is the big UK commentator at the time, Terry Wogan, basically thought that like Eurovision hated the UK, even for this number, was convinced that it was not the performance, but that the UK was being treated unfairly because the world was upset about the Iraq war, and he called it post-Iraq backlash.
Is that
why
what you were getting from that?
No, that's not at all what I got from that.
It made me really angry about the Iraq
You're
war
saying
watching.
It's so interesting. I think she's cute.
She's cute. He's there. He might be Daz Sampson.
Exactly. Does everybody sing in English?
Another
European.
great question.
Thank you very much.
So
in 1956,
for a
The
huge
Swedes
part
know
of
enough to
Eurovision,
sing
yeah.
English.
well,
Oh
my
my
God,
gosh,
you're nailing
you
it.
are nailing the history
Yeah.
here. The big stereotype when people do impressions of Swedes in
Yeah.
Norway is that you add in a lot of English words. Because it's very like, the Swedes will be like, oh ja, jag tycker det var jätteamazing. Ja, det var så bra. You like looked so cool. Ja.
Their English is so good. I was playing Ulla on Broadway.
I've heard of it.
Kofi Annan came backstage with his wife, his gorgeous Swedish wife. She comes into my dressing. Oh, your Swedish accent is so much better than mine. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. Because the crazy part is the Swedes speak really good English.
Yeah,
Like their
yeah.
English is perfect.
One of Sweden's biggest exports has become global pop.
Yeah.
So I think at this point they kind of feel
It
like
is their culture,
like
yeah.
sending something that's Max Martin like. They're like, that is us.
I was in Iceland. I had a host. They were telling me there's only about 300,000 Icelanders in the world.
Yeah.
And they are all on an app. So you can, when you're at a bar, you can make sure you're not too closely related.
Yeah.
This one Icelander, she said to me, oh no, if you want sex, you go to Sweden. I would love to know the difference between the different accents of all those Nordic countries.
Well, like the Norwegian accent is very much everything sounds like a question. So when people speak with Norwegian accent, it's very flat. And at the end, you always kind of go up. Hi, my name is Magnus. And people are always like, is that a question?
Yeah,
and like the Swedish accent is similar, but the up and down happens a lot more. So the Swedish, they go much more. And this is kind of where the Swedish chef comes from, because they have a lot of this up and down. And in Norway, we say that Danish is Norwegian with a hot potato in your throat.
Which also, I will say, was my kink in college.
The word waterproof in Norwegian is vanntett. It's basically spelled the same in Danish, but they say ventil.
Oh, it is. It's a little bit like, yes, it's gotta.
Yeah, it's like.
That's why you go to Sweden for sex, because the Danes have a gag reflex.
Icelanders have that. Yo. They speak both air going out and air coming in.
Because Icelandic is essentially original Norwegian, because Norwegians settled Iceland, but in the non-problematic way. Because the only people there before those Norwegians were volcanoes.
Yeah. Okay, but we're going to move back in time again. We are moving to 1970 in Spain. This song is called Gwendolyn.
Is that Julio? I've partied with Julio, and he is young. I think of him as so old. Well, they're sticking to him. He is their heartthrob. They're not showing the backups. Well, obviously, he danced again.
Yeah. Came in fourth, right?
Yeah.
Which was actually a kind of bad result for Spain because the previous 2 times they had won.
Now, the way Spain selects their entry it's called Benidorm Fest. He won that in 1968, but that was not how they picked their Eurovision act back then. And that's what kind of sort of like launched him a bit.
Yeah, Eurovision was kind of what introduced him to an international audience. He, shortly after this one, had a hit with a number in Galician. What's kind of cool about that is that, like, remember, this is like Franco's Spain, right? And so Franco is like very much like, we are Spain, we speak Spanish, despite the fact that I actually think that Franco was born in Galicia. But yes, so this was Julio Iglesias.
Finally, we're going to return to the Netherlands. Here is Calm After the Storm, which represented the country in 2014.
Tears on a highway, water in my eyes.
Okay, man in a black hat and a lot of silver. Woman, white dress, flowers, facing each other. Sort of like on one of those potties where you can both potty at the same time.
I was not, you're going to have to explain that to me.
You don't know those potties?
What's his name?
Oh, Jacob Dylan.
Yeah. Doesn't he kind of
does kind of look like Jacob Dylan.
Yeah, I think we're out of the surprise stars.
Yeah, no more
surprise stars.
That is Julio Iglesias and Olivia Newton-John.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of nice. They're both playing guitar. They're doing a little duet. He's playing it to the camera a little bit. I kind of like it, but I have no idea who they are. So how could they have danced again?
Well, this is the tricky thing about like the American market versus the European
I think
market.
they danced again.
Well, and I will give that to you. I think that they danced again, and then maybe someone got a little scared of the dance moves.
Yeah.
So they won several awards, hit the charts afterwards. Waylon, the guy, eventually left to work on his own stuff.
And this was like a few months after the win. But Ilse, the woman, kept the project going and actually just replaced Waylon with the guy who actually wrote the song. And they continued to be very successful.
See, she's a smarty pants.
So, Cady.
Yes. What? We're done. I did pretty well, I think.
Yeah, but I still have another question for you.
Oh.
I know. I'm sorry. And then you're free afterwards. What are your impressions, thoughts, general reactions?
I am massively in love with Eurovision because of its ingenuous nature. I mean, it really is so respectful of culture, individuality, and community. Right. Maybe that's what we like about it. Because if we're all a bit in the theater community in New York City, it's the sweetest community the most generous community.
Yeah. Mutual trauma, really.
I always say nobody goes into show business because everything's fine at home. but there is like a real.
If you got trauma, flaunt trauma.
Exactly. You got trauma, flaunt it. But there's something about live theater, live performance is hard and scary and, takes a little bit of courage. And we are mostly, for the most part, very supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And that's what appeals to me, why I do love the British Bake Off.
One of the good things that the Brits have done.
They know how to do that. They do other things so well. It's just shocking that they do this so poorly.
Yeah. They went through a period where they decided that Eurovision was trash and they weren't going to send.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
As our president said, they weren't sending their best.
Each country kind of goes through phases of the popularity. Like there gets to a point where if a country does really poorly several years in a row, some of the established artists kind of go, this might be too much of a risk.
Well, because it's also
to be an embarrassment.
I was going to say they did not
kill a
dance
career.
again.
Yeah.
Because also you represent a country. So like the country might be mad at you for being like, you embarrassed us.
I don't know it that well. I just know it from my one experience with Chiquita winning.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Conchita, but I really like it.
But I was, as an American, I was like, oh, that would never fly.
No.
Like it would not be the winner on American
No,
television.
exactly. The first time I went over to Magnus's to watch the broadcast, I was like, I felt watching it like I was on mushrooms. And that was only partially because I was on mushrooms,
That one landed.
Yeah. That one I've worked on.
See? That one. You've had time to hone
Rewrite, kids. It's important.
How many years has it been on the air?
Nearly
Every
70
year since 1956, with the exception of 2020.
Yeah. But like everything else, it's going to go through those ups and downs. And, it's like, and if that 72-year-old woman at a club is still getting cheered, I mean, there's something very beautiful about it.
Cady.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
This has been
guys
awesome.
for trekking all the way up here. And they moved my new piece of furniture upstairs.
One little Ulla move, and suddenly we were like, when did I lift up this piece of furniture?
What's he talking about? Oh my God, carrying this furniture is beautiful.
And on that note, I think that's a perfect way to end.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Euroverse.
Thank you so much to Scooch. Thank you so much to Cady Huffman. I mean, icons on both sides of the Atlantic.
Thank you to both of them. We hope you come back for our next episode.
Yes. But until then,
Happy Eurovision.